episode 23. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are extraordinarily important, not the least of which is the fact that we've got state who are Republican only blocking life saving pro life bills to stop abortion, things like the heartbeat bill, but they're bragging about it on places like ABC News and CNN with Amanpour. And of course, I'm talking about Senator who seem to relish in the limelight of the liberal left as they celebrated this bill being knocked down that would save the lives of babies. I'm really disappointed that she took to the airwaves of so anyways, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. We're going to pick up where John left off last week, talking about the net zero plan of our South Carolina legislatures and how that was carried on War Room. We're going to show a little bit of that video clip so you can kind of get a grasp of what it is they're talking about. But host here is
John Cummings, good morning.
so we're gonna kind of dive right in. I apologize that I am not as computer savvy as some of my cohorts who are better at using this system, but I'm gonna go ahead and play for you the last about 3 minutes of the war, talking about the net zero issue, and at the very end, they're specifically going to talk about how South Carolina is playing a part of this, and we really ought to be paying attention and calling our representatives. So let's give it a play here. And of course, the volume is now not working. And who knows why?
Well, just to set the stage, this interview was this past Saturday. Steve Bannon, of course, morning edition of War Room, which you can find just about everywhere. Namely, Pluto is probably the best place to find it. But he's
Yeah.
interviewing Dave Walsh. Dave Walsh is an energy expert. He used to be the head of Mitsubishi Power Systems. So there are probably few people on the planet who know more about the energy and the energy market than Dave Walsh does. So listen to this interview, and I think it'll surprise a lot of people in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Time had this massive welfare state, an economy that's collapsing. We continue to spend, and nobody really wants to stand up to it. At the same time, the world is sitting there going, "We're not buying into this anymore. We see what you guys are doing, and we think you're irresponsible." Walsh. Look, it's just a frightening prospect, and I think it's a reflection on where this country has descended to under Biden. Even our allies now are saying, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't follow the U.S. blindly." Look at what Macron was saying just a couple of weeks ago. But this is very, very concerning. I think nations are looking at the West as fat, spoiled, and weak, and now's the time to make their moves. And we're seeing that from a currency standpoint, from a military standpoint. The West is looking weak, and our enemies are taking action now. It's a big. Dave Walsh.
Well, we talk about, the South Carolina example, but this is happening in many, many, many of our states. South Carolina is a repository, a great recipient of tremendous amount of foreign investment, particularly from Germany, in terms of chemical plants and most notably power plants. Large things of historically very high German electricity costs at roughly 4.5 times those prevalent in South Carolina. South Carolina's enjoyed about 11 cents a kilowatt hour. Lower 20% of the U.S. in cost for electricity. Germany, before the crisis, 4.5 cent, 45. German chemical plants, auto plants have come to South Carolina. They've come in part because of the energy cost being preferential. However, now we've got the State House mandating that a lot of the regional utilities, such as the Santee Cooper in the Midlands, but 250,000 South Carolinians are supported by the Santee Cooper utility. The State House is commanding that they be net zero by 2050, which means they're going to spend, Santee Cooper alone, $15 billion on transitioning 2 great coal plants, the Wina and Cross plants, generating about collectively 3,400 megawatts of electricity. 61% of their base be eliminated by 2030. 17% solar, wind, and the balance with gas-fired technology at a cost to ratepayers in the Midlands of about $15 billion.
You're we're saying a Republican state because that's a
Republican State House pushing this.
that has
Yes.
two folks that are running for president, Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. The state house is put carbon.
Yeah, and this plan will push electricity costs for ratepayers in South Carolina up by a factor of 2.5 by 2050, and ruin its competitive advantage for industry.
Folks. Wow. Wow. So there you have it. They've put in this mandate to destroy our energy system in South Carolina. Now, John, I'm sure that when the energy cost goes up, that our wonderful legislators, Republican majority legislature, has a way in which they're going to offset this rise in energy. Don't have to pay that, right? There's a plan there.
Oh, I'm sure. And they're so upfront about the fact that, when you're looking at wind, solar, et cetera, it doesn't make up the difference, not even close. I think that what Dave was saying was that it would basically be about 17% of what they're generating currently. And the fact that wind farms, particularly offshore wind farms, they only work at their maximum, they work at about 48% of the time. But on average, it's below that. So where is this energy going to come from as they push you to electric cars with their
There's
$400
energy
million cash,
fairies.
cash handout to Volkswagen Scout and the other 1.3 billion in incentives to move their business here. So they're going to, give with one hand and take with the other because the rates are going to go through the roof. And I want to know too, there's a lot of stuff going on with these offshore contracts to build these wind farms right off of our coast. And where is this? We want to see the money, we want to see the plan, and we want to see what it's going to do to the environment. Like I said, I've been here on my place over a little over 5 years, and I knew from the beginning about the turtles, right? Everybody makes a big deal about the turtles, as well they should.
Yes.
But if you're gonna yell and scream about people about turning lights off about turtles, then you're gonna go out and mess with the ocean floor. And I'm sure we've all seen the reports about the number of whales that have washed up on the beach up in New Jersey and Long Island. And the only common thread that all of that has is that they're building these wind farms and using all sorts of blasting on the bottom of the ocean to figure out where exactly they can put these things. And seems to be completely disrupting wildlife, particularly whales. I mean, and all of this is going on quite surreptitiously, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. In fact, what I was going to suggest is that I'd like to talk with Will over at Fitz News and a folks I know are concerned, at least liberty minded. And let's see if we can't do some FOIA and find out if by any chance some of our illustrious legislators happen to be, I don't know, starting to invest in various companies whose responsibilities include building offshore windmills and solar panels.
Yeah, and I mean,
Because I have that we're going to find out that some of our folks are padding their pockets.
and when you look at the absolute disconnect between this Volkswagen Scout deal and making companies and people more dependent on the electric grid, and then you're going to go reduce the capacity of that same grid. I mean, it's all just so mindless that there has to be a reason. It can't be that you love nature. It can't be that you're an environmentalist, because there's plenty of people who say that these wind farms and even solar are not good for the environment. Solar, you're taking up tremendous pieces of land that are basically doing nothing. And, there's a whole soil erosion issue there. And there's so much that goes into that. But particularly, I'm concerned about the offshore stuff. Those offshore wind farms, like I said, they usually work about 42% of the time. They do obviously mess with nature. I don't know if you heard this story. Up in Virginia, they're putting them off the coast of Virginia, and apparently the companies or the government gave these leases to companies that want to build these wind farms right off the coast of Newport News and Hampton Roads, where our naval fleet is. So how's the naval fleet going to get in and out? It's a nuclear naval fleet, and they're going to build all these wind farms. I mean, are you just that daft, or are you just not in communication? One hand doesn't know what the other's doing, and that's usually the case in government. But
Yeah.
we need to get on, as a people, we need to get on top of this whole idea of A, reducing the ability for the grid to produce electricity, and B, we need to look at the problems to nature with these wind farms.
Well, I think what's interesting is that as our state is trying to transition us to net zero, and the first phase of this is going to take place in 2032, which, folks, is 9 years away. They're also transitioning us to battery operated vehicles, or as they like to call them, electric vehicles. So I think it's kind of it's like you got two trains into a head-on collision, because you're going to reduce the amount of electricity we can produce while simultaneously increasing the requirement for electricity, not to mention the number of people moving to our state. But now you're going to create this extra need for electricity, so that you have these battery operated vehicles that have to be charged with electricity each and every day. Those two things combined together with a serious reduction of our electric output, tends to lend me to think that, John, we're about to be California light with rolling blackouts and brownouts. Does our government not see that? Or are they just blind to it?
I'm sure they see it, but they probably just want to ignore it. And that has been the case all over the country. These people are so wrapped up in this whole carbon emissions issue. And I don't even want to get into the climate change issue, because it's just, I think me personally, I just think it's a scam. And I told you part of the reasons why the other day. But I mean, can we work to secure a clean environment? Sure we can. Sure we can. But you don't have to starve people in the process. And people think that that might be a pretty strong term. Hey, if you're going to get electric rates that are 2.5 to 3 times higher, the average person isn't going to be able to pay for it. And
Right.
also the price of food is going to go through the roof. So where exactly, and then how do you make up the energy? Well, you have to buy it from a bigger consortium, probably like Dominion Energy or Huge
Mhm.
Energy, and they're going to charge you, full bill, no doubt about that. And then you're just overloading the grid. We have more natural gas in this country than, like, we are the Saudi Arabia of
Mhm.
natural gas, and we're not going to use it.
Right.
And
Right.
here's the buried lead, is that when we went under President Trump, when we went heavy with the natural gas and the natural gas exploration, and we had the pipelines working, that our carbon emissions went down dramatically compared to other countries that are involved in this. And the other point that Dave made the other day, Dave Walsh, was that there are only 13 countries that are adhering to this net carbon zero. The other 170 are not, including China and India. So ours is
The
just, I
biggest
mean,
polluters.
you're just spitting in the wind here. That's all you're
Yeah.
doing. In fact, India has increased their dependency on coal, and Japan has opened 5 new coal plants in the last several years to make up for Fukushima. So they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And we're not saying that we shouldn't take care of the environment here, but you have to do this. If you want to do it, you have to do it slowly. You have to
Right.
do
And
it
responsibly.
slowly. Yeah, and maybe,
Did
okay,
you catch
maybe by
Senator Kennedy?
2100. Yeah, oh yeah, I saw him. Yeah, Senator Kennedy went
So
after.
Senator Kennedy kind of went after our energy. What was the guy's name?
Yeah, he wasn't the
Help me out here.
Secretary of Energy, but he was
It was
Assistant
like the
Secretary
vice
of Energy.
secretary,
I
assistant
saw him.
secretary.
Yeah.
But still, he made the point that he asked us, what's this going to cost us? Is it 50 trillion? And the guy would never be pigeonholed. He said, well, it'll be trillions of dollars, but hey, it's going to be more expensive if we don't do it. And then, Senator Kennedy said, well, what is this going to gain us in terms of benefit after we've spent $50 trillion? And he couldn't even answer the question.
No.
He can't tell you what it's going to cost, and he can't tell you that what the result's going to be after you spend the money. Folks, this is a sham. It is nothing but a way in which to spread the wealth. And as John said, let me explain to you why people being hungry and starving. Because, have you been into your grocery store and you walk through the frozen food section and it's cold back there? Because they have to have refrigeration to keep that food frozen or cold or fresh or whatever. Well, guess what? When they start raising the, everybody has to pay more except for the grocery stores. You guys, you're locked in at that lower rate. No, they're going to charge them more. Do you think they're going to let that bite into their profit margin? Absolutely not. They're going to pass that increase on to you and I, the consumer. Same with the processing plants where they actually an increase. All of those things eventually make their way back to our pocketbooks, and we are going to be paying for that. And then you have the folks at home who cannot afford the current electric bills, and suddenly they're going to find themselves in a position where they really to cook the food, to keep the food. We're looking at a serious, serious problem. And it's not something that's, many years down the road. We're talking about, 2032, 9 years from now, folks, is when this is going to start in earnest. And so we have time to roll this back. It'll require that we reach out, call your legislatures and say, what the heck are you doing? And for many, it's going to mean that you have to step out of your comfort zone and be prepared and willing to run for office yourself, because we've got to fix this. Because I'm telling you right now, the folks that we have up there in our state legislature, and I don't just mean the Democrats, because we have a supermajority of Republicans, they are not doing the work of we the people. They're doing the work of we themselves and the lobbyists and the chambers of commerce. That's what they're doing, and it does not benefit you and I at all.
Yeah, and just to give you an example of places that have implemented similar plans to this, New York is one of them. I'm sure you saw the headlines this morning where New York State has basically banned all natural gas hookups for stoves and heat, etc., in new construction, which is just insanity. They already reduced their ability to generate electricity by closing the nuclear power plant in Indian Point, which is in somewhat understandable because it was built in the wrong place. It was too close to population, but they got rid of about 25% of their ability already to produce electricity. Now, this is anecdotal, but people I know in New York City, and this wasn't a bad winter up there. They did not have a bad winter up there. I knew people that were paying upwards of $1,000 a month gas and electric. And I'm not talking about mansions. I'm talking about 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. They're paying close to $1,000 a month in January and February for heat and electric. Now, one of the great things about living down here is that, and you heard Dave Walsh talk about it. That's why businesses come here, is because we have cheap and abundant energy. And that's all going to go by the boards in about 9 years. If they close those 2 coal plants, that's going to be a catastrophic hit on our ability to have reasonably priced energy. And then we're going to have to purchase it from somewhere else, some big conglomerate, and then they have you. They have you because you have no alternatives.
Yeah. Well, I will agree. Janet Spratt just said, when was the last time that anyone recalls a real conversation taking place between ourselves and our legislators? And the truth of the matter is, Jeanette, we don't have that. We don't have that ability because our legislators hide. Here at the ORI delegation, I can't remember the last time the delegation said, hey, let's hold a and let the folks from ORI tell us what they think about the job we're doing, because they're scared. They know that we're not happy, and they know that if we actually knew, if we were all informed about what was going on in our state, we would be livid, probably up in arms to that degree. And this is just a tip of the iceberg, folks. This is not something that we can say, well, this is not going to be a major deal. It is a big deal. No, I agree with you. Joe White, Adam Morgan, RJ Mays, there are a lot of folks, but they're all within the Freedom Caucus. And unfortunately, Jeanette, none of those folks are here in ORI. We don't have any conservative representation here in ORI County. We have a bunch of we have a few moderates and a bunch of liberals, really. And to that end, I do want to talk about the fact that we have problems within our region, if you will, Florence County, the Democratic Party. Yesterday, I follow them on a politics page, and they put up a post that I'm going to put it up and just give you about 5 seconds to read that, and then just ponder, if you will, what exactly they're saying. So let's take a look at this. So Florence County Democratic Party put this up yesterday. It says, I'll be voting for the party that wants to give 4th graders free lunches instead of one that wants to force them to give birth. Now, we talk about 4th graders, folks. We're talking about 9-year-olds. So the Florence County Democratic Party apparently believes that it is for 9-year-olds to become pregnant in our state and then be forced to give birth. Again, Florence County Democratic Party. I'll be voting for the party that wants to give 4th graders, 9-year-olds, free lunches instead of one that wants to force 9-year-olds. Now, John, I don't know about you, but my first question is, where's the rapist? Where's the pedophile who raped, molested this child? And that should be our focus, because that is appalling that they would use that as an example. Brave the Democratic Party actually is. I could have been, if they had said, I'll be voting for the party that wants to give, 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders free lunches instead of the one that wants to force them to give birth. I might have said, all right, I see your point. But you go to fourth grade, you're sick. You are sick, sick, sick people. And I would love for you to list to me the examples of fourth graders that have, one, become pregnant in the state, and two, been forced to have the child. I bet you money there is not one example, but they use this.
Oh, that's right out of the left's playbook. That's what they always do. They go for the emotion, and they really push it to the outer edge to do so. It's always like, just like they always say, Republicans are going to take Medicare, they're going to take Medicaid, they're going to starve grandma. You know, they remember the commercial when they push her off the cliff. All of those things. This is what they do, and this is even extreme for them. You know, pushing grandma off the cliff. Okay, I got that. You know, we've all seen it. This is really extreme, but this is where they want to go with it. This is exactly where they want to go with it. So, and that's why, you know, I hate to say this, we're really almost to the point where you cannot work with these people. They're just not rational human beings. They're not. They just don't think rationally. They think emotionally. There's no fact-based evidence in anything that they talk about. It's all about emotions. And we're, like I said, we're almost to that point where you used to be able to negotiate across the aisle. And we're almost to that point. You can't negotiate with people who are just living on emotion and no fact.
Yeah, I don't know. When I saw this, it literally sickened me. It made me want to vomit that they would actually think of an example of a 9-year-old child being impregnated, and their concern is that we would try to force them to give birth, as opposed to being concerned for that child's welfare.
Yeah,
I've seen. Go ahead.
the fact that your thought process would even go that way tells you all you need to know about the emotional thinking.
Right, right. And this kind of plays into, folks. I just want to say this. This plays into the whole gender ideology that they're pushing on. It can be whatever you want to be, whatever you identify with. Now, I don't know if you've seen this story, but out of I think it's Indiana, there's a councilman. His name is Ryan. I don't know his last name. I've forgotten, but he's a Republican, and so he, as a transgender. He said that he's a Caucasian male. He said that he now identifies as a woman of color and as a lesbian. Now, that's partly due to the fact that he's married with 6 children. And now I think we all know the point that he's trying to make. If you're going to allow anybody to say, well, I feel like this, I feel like that, and you can't question them. Remember, we're not allowed to question. We cannot say, are you serious? Do you really, do you really believe that? You're not allowed to ask those questions. And so there were several plus whatever that came on to or came to the county council meeting there in Indiana and said, if you were really serious, if you really were a woman, a transgender woman, we would support you, but we know you're just mocking us, you're making fun of us, and so how can you expect us to believe it? He said, wait a minute, I didn't make the rules, you did. Then by your rules, you're not allowed to question me. You cannot question my true self. You cannot question my identity. Now, he has maintained his name. He's keeping his name Ryan, because of course that can go. I have a cousin and her name is Ryan. It's spelled a little different, but same. And of course he still uses the pronouns he, him. So they got him. He got him yesterday, who came on, and I posted the little meme that someone put up and said, if you put 100 women and 10 men on an island, deserted island, in 100 years you would find a thriving community of men, women, children, boys and girls, etc. If you pins women on an island with 10 men, in 100 years you would find the skeletal remains of 110 males. And so this gentleman came on there and immediately said, oh, well, you're the logical conclusion is that they have no rights and they're this and they're that. And I said, no, the logical conclusion is, and then he went on to say that I was being bigoted and that they should be allowed to do whatever they want. And I said, okay. I said, this to me, as a woman, as a natural born woman, is no different than blackface. When someone puts blackface on and parades around and mimics black thing. And I said, so if you can explain to me why blackface should not be insulting, then I say it's the exact same thing. So if you can explain to me why that is not insulting, then I will agree with you. And he has since not commented. He's not made
No,
another comment
of
because he
course
realizes,
not.
oh, I can't go down that road because I'm racist.
And it really just shows too that, we're no longer a serious nation, and the media plays a large role in that. The fact that we allow them to dictate the terms of every discussion, um, this gender reaffirming surgery, is that what you're going to call it? Gender reaffirming? What are you reaffirming exactly? You're not doing anything of the sort. And again, there's such a disconnect. There was a legislation introduced at the federal level that would prohibit people 13 and under from going on social media. So you don't think that 13-year-olds are responsible enough to be on social media, but you think it's okay if they're 8 years old if they want to have gender reaffirming surgery? I mean, that really? How about is
Right.
that a disconnect for you or what? I mean, it's just mind-boggling, and still is. There's tons of states that you can't get a tattoo unless you're 18. But you're going to
Well,
let
in
8-year-olds,
Facebook, you
4 year
have to be 15 to
right,
actually have an account.
right.
So why is that?
But you're gonna let a child make up his or her mind on gender reaffirming. So I saw a meme the other day. It's just
Youngest
the mother,
too, they're doing
the
that.
mother and the daughter at the table, and the daughter looks at the mom and says, "I think I'm a boy," and the mother looks at her and says, "You're not," and that's it.
I saw that too. I
You're
said, that's
not.
brilliant. You're not. Well, you're
You're
not.
not. Okay.
Listen, again, I will use myself as growing up with two older brothers. I had twin brothers, and they were 5 years older than me. And my sisters and brothers, they were much older. So most of them were actually out by the time I was kind of growing up, if you will. And I remember my brothers got to do all kind of cool stuff, and they had a lot more leeway in terms of what things they could do. And they could go out and just, go behind a tree and pee. And I couldn't do that. And I remember thinking, I wish I could stand up and pee. Doggone it. Why can't I go running around without a shirt on? All these different things. And so I was like, I want to be a boy. But it was not because I thought I was a boy. That wasn't it. It was because I wanted the benefits we're getting that I, as a girl, was not allowed to have. And I was very much a tomboy because if you wanted to survive with two older brothers, you better be tough because they didn't pull any punches. But of course, obviously, I grew up, I played sports, and then I'm actually quite happy as a woman, and I don't want to transition to a male. I have no more desire to do that. But I also reached out to quite a few of my lesbian friends because I played college sports and I coached collegiately, and I have a number of really good, close lesbian friends, and several of them are married to their significant others. About whether or not you agree or disagree with that, but the fact remains that I called them and I said, okay, let me ask you the question: if you were given the opportunity to transition to a male, would you do it? And I spoke to both sides of the couple, and both of them said, and I'm going to quote them, they said, and I quote, hell. Was unanimous across the half a dozen lesbian couples that I spoke with. They all said, hell no, they would not have transitioned to a man. They were happy as women. They were lesbians. They were not men trapped in a woman's body. So they agreed that this is ludicrous, that the child transitioning from a female to a male or male to a female at before the age of 18 was insane. And the closest that any of them got to allowing a minor, if you will, is one suggested that you should not even be allowed to go to counseling to discuss this option until you're at least 15 or 16, and still not allowed to have any kind of surgery, but just be able to go into counseling and have a discussion about how you feel to make sure if that's really what you feel, or if it just happens to be that you're a guy that's attracted to males, meaning that you're homosexual, not that you're a woman trapped. So, I mean, and again, as a Christian, I have all different kind of views on that, and I'm not going to push those views. What I will say is that we used to be a country that allowed you to think and say pretty much whatever you wanted, as long as you weren't literally calling for violence. Now, there are some people say you can't stream fire in law. That's not a thing. That was smacked down quite a while ago. But what you cannot do is go out there and try to incite riots. So as long as you're not trying to incite a riot or insurrection or whatever, you're good to go. You can say pretty much whatever you want. So I am well within my constitutional God-given right to say, I do not that a man who claims to be a woman and puts on lipstick, grows his hair out, and gets fake boobs is now got to be called ma'am. Nope, not doing it. Sorry. I refuse, will not do it. And I will not stand by and watch biological males compete in women's sports and say it's all fine. It's not okay. It is wrong.
Well, I'm sure you saw the federal bill that went through the House about men participating in women's sports, and it was unanimously turned down by the Democrats. Unanimously. There
Shocking.
were, I mean, but I don't understand, where are the feminists? I've been around, this. I've been around college athletics for going on 30 years. And I worked in women's basketball for over 25 years. So I was around at the beginnings of Title IX women's sports, when we started to see things change, and how all the accommodations changed, and how the money that was put into the program changed, and all of that. And it's been a beautiful thing to watch. There's no reason that young girls shouldn't get the same opportunities to play in high school sports, so that they can earn a way for somebody else to pay for their education. I mean, that's obviously what you're doing it for. I mean, it's a great way to do it. I used to tell my
Right.
own sons all the time, look, I don't care what you do, just do it well enough that somebody else can pay for college, because there's not a lot of money flying around here. And they both did very
Exactly.
well with that. But the fact that all of these opportunities over a long period of time finally came about for young
Mhm.
girls and then women,
Yep. Yep.
was just, like I said, it was a beautiful thing to watch. And now you watch the Final Four now, and you see what's going on. That people of all shapes and sizes and colors and ethnicities, everybody's watching women's basketball. Whereas
Yeah.
25 years ago, we couldn't get 10 people to a game. So you watch all that, and now you're going to undo it by letting men participate. I mean,
Right.
it's just, and look, it's two different things. I'm sure you've all seen the clip of Serena Williams talking about playing tennis on one of the talk shows, and she said, "Look, I'd lose 6 love to any top 100 male in tennis."
Mhm.
She was the greatest player in the world. She said, I get
Yep.
the floor. It's two different sports, and
Yep.
people have to understand that. And you know what the sad thing is? Everybody knows it, but nobody's afraid to stand up and
Right.
say, "Hey, stop." Especially, I mean, I hate to say this, especially on the women's side, especially on the feminist side. I mean, look what Riley Gaines is going through. I had the opportunity to talk to her at one of the CPACs, and a really impressive woman, very impressive.
Yes.
And she's
Yes.
standing her ground, and she gets no support from the feminist movement. I can't talk about it
Well, the
long
feminist
enough. For
movement is now comprised
25
of
years, they
cowards.
pushed and pushed
Yeah.
and pushed
Yeah.
and pushed, and they finally got where they want to be. And you're going to undo it because some guys want to play dress up. Remember that movie? You try to find this on any Netflix or any movie service. Try to find Joanna Man now. If you ever saw that
Yeah.
movie about the guy who pretends as a woman so he can play in women's basketball, you're not going to
Mhm.
find it, because they make fun of
Yep.
it. And now they realize that it's reality. You know what it is? We're just not a serious nation. We're not.
Yeah.
We're having
Yeah.
discussions that are mindless about men nursing babies, and it's just all mindless. And people accept it like it's fact.
Right. Another clip that the gentleman was talking about how wokeism is basically Marxism, and I wish I could think of his name right now, but it totally is gone out of my head. And he talked about how when they first started, they thought, okay, Marxism is going to be the rich versus the bourgeois versus that didn't work out, because in capitalism everybody said, well, even if you're a working man, you will have the propensity and the ability to move up and to become either upper middle class or potentially a rich man. You can join the bourgeoisie, you're not prohibited from it. So that's why it failed miserably, because it would not get past Eastern Europe. No, we have capability. We have opportunities here. So they got together and they said, okay, what can we do to get Marxism to actually take off? And they said, okay, well, here's what we do. We do we do race. And so they first went into the race issue, and that's why you saw a lot of the Black Panther movements and the Black Lives Matter movement. They're Marxist. And they said, okay, now let's up the ante, and let's now use this gender ideology to create another wedge in our society. And all of it is basically Marxism disguised as something else. And so if you want to know what our country is going to look like if we continue down this road, we're going to look like China. 100% like China. And I saw a discussion about the central banking digital currency, and folks were saying, well, that's not going to happen, and we're just looking at something similar to what China has. I'm like, do you hear what you're saying? Okay, if banking digital currency, because there were several, Matt Gates and some others said this is exactly what's going to happen. And then and it was Ron DeSantis went on and said, look, this is going to be where our government tells you, sorry, you can't have that. You've already, purchased your allotment of gasoline. You're not allowed to purchase anymore, except, oh, that's never going to happen. We're more in tune with what the Chinese are doing. Well, that's what the Chinese are doing. They're literally sanctioning their individual citizens to the point that they have an app on their phone, similar to what we had during COVID. When you were around anybody that had tested positive for COVID, it would tell you, hey, wow, you gotten too close. Now their phones actually say, you can't hang out with John over here because John's not doing what the CCP wants. So he's blackballed, blacklisted. So it would tell me, oh, whoop, get away from John. And that's on their phone systems today. That is their ESG system they have today. And that's what our towards. And Biden, in his feeble-mindedness, is being used like a puppet. And he is being played. He don't know what day it is. So the folks behind the curtain are the ones pulling the strings.
Yeah, and then when you combine the ideological infiltration, which was done purposely, as you mentioned, just to divide us and take it along any sector you want to take, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever. They've done all that they can do to divide us. And then you throw on top of this whole Green New Deal environmentalist radicalism that is basically designed to create an oligarchy at the top. The rich have theirs and they're going to keep it. And they're going to eliminate the middle class and the working class through these monstrous utility rates. It's the perfect storm for a Marxist takeover, and people don't want to even admit to it. And I remember President Trump saying the other day that, I always said that we would never have socialism in this country. And he says, and I was right. They went right to communism. They didn't even stop at socialism. They just went right to communism.
Right.
And you know what? He's right. He's absolutely right. And like I said, unless and until we become a serious nation and people get the chops to stand up and fight back against these ideas and ideals, we're going to go right down the tubes, and most of Western Europe is going to follow us.
Yeah. And folks, how this plays into state politics, I don't want you to think we're talking about something that's just a national issue. This is a state issue. And I know that Governor DeSantis and just a handful of other Republican governors are actually pushing their now to create so that he can then sign into law that will prohibit ESG from being allowed. Now let's go back to South Carolina and our famous decision to pay money to get Scout and VW to come here. John, does VW and Scout have any kind of ESG? I mean, are they?
Oh, they have a great score, don't they? No, they have a great score, don't they? I mean, depending on which side you're looking at it, they're one of the most woke corporations in the world. I think they're number 7 as far as size is concerned. So they certainly didn't need the break. But that just tells you all you need to know about what's going on in Colombia, is that they're going, even though the Republicans have a supermajority and you have a Republican governor, they're pretty much going full tilt woke behind the scenes. And unfortunately, the media doesn't really cover it. And they'll cover parts here. You see a few spots here and there about the possible wind farms. And it's funny, in the South Carolina media, they usually talk about it. Well, this is in North Carolina. No, there's plans. I saw them. There's plans that have been drawn up for wind farms right off the coast here. And you don't know what they're going to do. And the fact that again, as far as a serious nation, the fact that we're even discussing going back to windmills, I mean, that's what they are. They're windmills, and you're dependent on the wind. We went from saying that, well, we don't know how much oil we have because it's not a renewable resource. Now, truth be told, they don't really know that because nobody knows what's at the core of the earth. But they went for years telling us we're going to run out of oil. We're going to run out of oil. And then you're going to go to something that only works 42% of the time and combine oil and
here. What was the name? I can't think of it.
Cervantes. Right?
Cervantes, thank you.
Don Quixote.
Yeah. So maybe
tilting at windmills, right? We need Don Quixote.
Need to create a Don Quixote opposition to the windmills here in South Carolina, because this is nuts.
It really is, and we really need, and this is another perfect opportunity for groups to get together who normally would not be together. So you have your hard environmentalists, and if you're a true environmentalist and you really believe in nature and its importance, there is no way that you could favor the construction of these windmills off the coast. There just isn't.
Right.
And because the harm that they do is far greater than any harm that the use of natural gas, or the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, nuclear. We can't even build nuclear plants here, which is, that leaves a zero carbon footprint. But you cannot mention I always tell people that's the other N word. I mean, that's what it is.
Exactly.
People don't want to
That's
talk
what we
about
have.
nuclear.
Duke Power actually has a big facility down in Lake Wiley, South Carolina. They're probably 2 miles from my aunt's house and about 4 miles from my mom's house, and it generates quite a bit of energy, obviously.
Yeah, and I heard Dave Walsh talk
Yeah,
about this
and
too.
folks,
They can even build smaller facilities that are more localized now,
right.
and they're extremely safe. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
we still go back. Oh my God, 3 Mile Island. That was 40 years ago.
Right.
We've made some advancements technologically to make sure that doesn't happen. So you don't have to build
Yep.
these monster plants. You can actually build what are called satellite plants and generate electricity, but you cannot do that. And the way they reuse the rods, I know technologically speaking, they can use them for a longer period of time. So you don't have to get rid of them as soon. And no, we can never talk about that. We can never talk about,
Right.
that's the one thing nobody wants to talk about in France. I think they get close to 80%, or they were getting close to 80% of their power from nuclear plants.
Well, now, shh, John, you can't talk about that. That's they're
I
gonna
know.
cut us off if we talk about that. And
They're
folks,
gonna cut
understand this
themselves
is
off.
yeah, this is not an issue that's being brought into the South Carolina state by a legislature that is Democratic controlled. No, it's Republican controlled. We have more than enough votes to override any push back by the Democrats, or anything the Democrats push forward. If we don't agree with it, we can stop it. And yet, I want to give you an example. This is example number one. Yesterday, I saw a story that was shared by our state Penry Gustafson, a Republican, in which she went on, I think it's Chrissy Amanpour on CNN,
Right.
among other shows. That wasn't the only one she did. And she was happily bragging about how she stood up against the anti-abortion bill, the pro-life bill, and pushed back and was able to prevent it from seeing the light of day. And she was on the show and being interviewed. And at the end of the interview, Amanpour asked her, is there anything else? What about your position on the constitutional carry? And Penry's response was, well, I know my constituents want me to still carry, but I'm just torn. And I thought to myself, then you don't represent the people. You represent yourself. Your job is not to go to Columbia to decide what you think is best and ignore the constituents that tell you we want this. You are a representative. And right now, you do not represent the best interest. So let's take a look at. So anyway, I came up today and I went to look at that post that I'd shared, and Penry has blocked that now. She's taken that down, but it didn't take me but about 2 seconds to go to YouTube, and you can find multiple examples of that. This is one with the Washington Post, and you see there Republican women blocked South Carolina abortion ban. And she's bragging about this. Penry is just like happy to tell everybody. I mean, you would have thought she was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson before he got removed from Fox. Proud to be, and I was sickened. I've actually had lunch with this woman. I've sat down with her because I thought she was a conservative, and then on the show, she exactly, Jeanette. She was torn, and she does sound like a Tom Rice. She's on the show talking about how she proudly stood up and prevented this pro go forward, and that as a Christian woman and a conservative, she couldn't. And I thought, back up. You need to stop calling yourself a Christian. If you're going to support the murder of babies, stop. Don't use the word Christian ever again in any sort of public manner, because that is, and I can't even speak, John. That was stunning to me that she did that.
Yeah, and my thoughts too are, this is the end of the line with this bill. I mean, this is the last stop. So if you were that concerned about parts of the bill, and other people were as well, and I'm talking Republicans,
Yep.
if you were that concerned, when this was all in committee, how did the arguments go? Were there any proposals to make amendments? Were there any proposals to make adjustments? Or did you just decide at the end that, hey, you know what, I can make this whole thing stop anyway, so I'll just make it stop? You know, there's always some room there. And people say on the abortion bill there is no room. Obviously, there are negotiations that you can have to get something in place. But now we're back to where we started, right? 20 weeks. So
Right.
you have neighboring states that have tightened it up. And guess where they're coming for abortions? They're coming to South
Yeah, South
Carolina.
Carolina.
So we're going to have this big time red conservative state that's going to be the abortion haven. I mean, it's beyond sad. It's beyond sad.
And I guess, had she gone onto the show and said, look, I want a strong pro-life bill to pass. I'm a Christian and I believe in it. But this bill had some serious problems. And so because of that, it wasn't something that would have passed. And so through, and that's why this bill failed. I maybe could have taken that, but to go on there and to be so happy about it. Well, I stood up and I fought against it. And there's video of her and other senators really bombastically attacking this bill. You do not understand your constituents. You do not understand what it is to be a Christian, and you don't understand conservatism. Because if you did, you would not be behaving in the manner in which you are. So it is my hope, folks, that we can get her primaried and ousted. She needs to go.
Yeah, and
Penry
that's
just
yeah,
voted out.
that's the important thing here is that, you know, there are no rules that say you have to vote yourself with the people that rule per se. But if you choose to ignore your constituents, you do so at your own peril. And I guess this is why they try to institute that whole the loyalty oath. So people like this wouldn't get primaried. Well, guess what? People like this are going to get primaried because the people will speak and they will speak at the ballot box. And that's the chance that you take. And she took the chance and she put herself out there. And she put some great material out there that any opponent can use in commercials that will turn the people against her pretty fast.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought. And I thought it was laughable that she took it down off her personal page as if that's going to somehow, quell shit. No, honey, I am going to be playing this. They played over and over again. I will spend money to play these videos in your district so that you never have an opportunity to serve in any capacity as a state legislator, whether as a House or a senator in the state of South Carolina ever again. Folks, this is where we have to make certain that we remove these people, because this is exactly how they end up as our U.S. senators and our U.S. congressmen and women, because they start out at the local level and they make their way up. In the military, we say you screw up, you move up. Well, it's time to put a stop to that nonsense. And when these folks show you who they are, when they show, believe them. Believe them. So Penry Gustafson is not a conservative, and I would dare say she's not a Republican. She's probably a Democrat, and she just decided to run as a Republican because, I don't know, maybe she thought that was a better way to get into office, or perhaps it's because the gentleman that she was running it wasn't, that was the only way she was going to take them out. Whatever the case may be, she must be fired from her job. She cannot remain a state senator. So in 2024, somebody in her district, for the love of all that's holy, please run against this woman. And as John said, all you got to do is these video clips where talking on these super liberal CNN, ABC, MSNBC shows, talking about how she personally, by herself, shut down this bill. Please share that repeatedly, because we've got to take these people to task and replace them with true conservatives, or our state is doomed.
Yeah. And again, exhibit number 437 as to why we need to get rid of open primaries. Because
Yes.
look, it is difficult to primary people like this because there are Democrats in the district that will come over and vote in a Republican primary and put somebody like that over the top. And then the true Republicans have to go in and hold their noses in November. And that's what happens time after time after time. And that's one of the reasons there needs to be a big push to get rid of the open primary. So it's easier to defeat people like this at the primary.
Yes. I was looking at some of the other things that were going on in the state, and one of those things is the bill that was supposed to increase, and we was to increase the penalties for dealing in fentanyl. Now, the group Fentanyl Kills You was there yesterday to try and push forward, excuse me, not yesterday, they were there Tuesday, to push forward the bill that has been stalled, stymied, whatever you want to call it, in the Senate. Both were kind of holding the bill, as well as Rutherford, where he was against it totally. The House Representative Minority Leader Todd Rutherford has said, "Oh, that bill's never going to pass. It's never going to see the light of day." And we've talked repeatedly about the fact that, even in a state like New York, they've already said, "Hey, this is, you do this, you give a drug that kills somebody, we're going to charge you with murder." So why is it that our legislature is struggling to get this bill across the finish line? And I'm afraid, John, that the folks who went there on Tuesday were just getting lip service, because Representative Tommy Pope and some others told them, "Oh, no, 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 we're still working on the bill's not dead. It's still in motion." I think the bill's dead, and I think he just patently lied to them. I really do. I think it's a lie, because we'll see very soon, because May 11th is coming. And if that bill does not get pushed forward to be signed by the governor, it's a dead bill.
And it's just one more issue. If they do not pass this bill, this is not a Republican Democrat issue.
Right.
People want this bill passed, period. And if it doesn't get passed and it gets held up, and the constitutional carry gets held up, these are just two more things to beat these people over the head with, figuratively, obviously, not literally. You got to qualify that nowadays.
Right.
Otherwise, I think you're threatening people.
Indeed.
This is just one more thing to beat candidates up with. I mean, you cannot let this bill die. Simple as that. Like you said, I knew people up in New York, and they lost their son, and they caught the dealer, and they prosecuted him for murder, and they convicted him in New York. If you can't do that down here, what's the sense of having a legislature? I mean, clean house and start all over again. But this is something that they can hold up. And if they do hold it up, the people that are responsible for that are going to pay at the polls. And that's exactly why people need to get involved. They need to get out and vote. And like we've always said, you need to run for office.
Yeah. And whether you've watched this live or whether you're watching this later, if you have any interest whatsoever, and you're a conservative, and you're Christian, you're Republican, and you really understand the conservative positions, please reach out to me, because I will put you in touch with some folks that can help you get your campaign started, kind of show you what you need to know, how to get your campaign funding going, all of those things that you need. And myself and John and Jeanette, we're here. We all know what it is to run. We've been there. Both John and Jeanette have run for U.S. Congress. I only ran for county council, but I know that you guys understand that it's not an easy, opening up an account, and you got to have, all the filings have to be reported. And if you miss any for it, myself, they had a new system, and the person that was helping me, I won't name their name, but they were an elected official themselves. And so they were trying to help me get these things filed. And we had a myriad of problems. I spent more time on the phone with the state ethics commission, South Carolina Ethics Commission, trying to figure out this system than I care to admit. And over again, we would get to the final day, and it'd be the deadline. And I say, "Look, this is not working. It's frozen." "Oh, well, somehow you have two accounts." "How do I have two accounts? Close one out. I'm just one person." And I was told repeatedly, "Don't worry about it. We're not going to fine you. This is a problem we're having with the system." And guess what, John? They fined me $400. So I paid it. And of course, I included in there the note saying that you guys told me repeatedly that this was not going to be a problem, that you understood it was an issue on your end, and you weren't going to fine me. Yet here I am being fined $400. So, middle note to myself: in the future, if I decide to run Candy Striper or whatever, I am going to, if I have any problems, I'm going to say, "I need that in writing." Yes, I think so as well. Jeanette said that she thinks that the state ethics pulled something unethical themselves, and it cost her $500. And as I said, it cost me $400. And I think that was purposeful. I'm gonna sound a little conspiratorial here, but I kind of feel like it might have even been something that Drew McKissick pushed out. That Drew said, "Hey, I want these people's election campaigns to be verified and checked to make sure that if they did anything that we can punish them for, let's do that." To that end, what I would like to say is that state convention is scheduled for May 20th. And as I understand it, I saw an email that came out that said that Zoe Warren, we had on our show just a little bit ago, was close. He was within 20%, the 20% margin of being able to gather enough votes to beat Drew. Now, folks, I cannot state the importance of getting this man out of office. If you don't understand why our state has so many liberal Democrats, you have to look no further than the head of the state SCGOP, which is Drew McKissick. He has continually to people that were not conservative, and he actually got behind using his power illegally and unethically, I might add, to try to take out a guy like Jonathan Hill, who's probably as conservative as the day is long. And so we need to get this guy out of office because he is running around supporting people who are anything but conservative. And it's time for him to be replaced. And let's get somebody else in there who's not a good old boy to actually get the work of the party done. Someone who is not going to be. And here's the thing: when you run for office, whatever, there are going to be people that just don't like you because they don't like you, whatever, and you have to go on. And if I was elected, the people that didn't vote for me, I still represent those people. I don't just represent the people that voted for me. I represent all the people. And so Drew has a problem that anytime folks are opposed to him or go against him, he actually takes it personal. And he goes after them in an attacking fashion, which is what he's done in both Horry County, Oconee, Anderson, Greenville, York. I mean, it's pretty dismal the way in which he has behaved. And so my hope is that we're going to try to reach out to Zoe again and have him either the Tuesday before the election on that Saturday, or I hope ideally to have him on the Thursday before the election. And I want it to be a special thing. So that particular event is going to happen in the evening. So we're gonna run it at 7 p.m. So that we can get as many people, as many eyes on as we possibly can. I'm going to reach out to Zoe and confirm that date, and then I'm going to reach out to some other folks across the state to get them to let this interview. And we're going to let Zoe once again reiterate why he believes he is a better choice for the state party chair.
And the South Carolina GOP is just a microcosm of what's going on at the national level. It's pretty much the same in every, particularly in quote unquote red states. It's the same battle. It's the grassroots against the Republicans who are in place, the establishment Republicans and the Democrats. So you're fighting two fights at the same time, and it shouldn't be that way. And the way to stop this is to get a new chair in place. Like I said, all you have to know about Chairman McKissick is he's Ronna McDaniel's right-hand man. That's enough for me. That's reason enough to get him out. Because guess
and let
what?
me just say,
They're not good at what they do.
Romney
Yeah,
McDaniel.
they get the wrong people on the ballot, and guess what? Very often they lose. And if they get the people they like, they'll push them over, especially here, because I know not to beat the dead horse, but the open primaries play right into that. Now, I have seen Chairman McKissick come out and speak against open primaries, but personally, I think behind the scenes he probably likes them because it allows it gives you much more power, and because the grassroots is much more effective when you have a closed primary system. It's just a fact. I mean, it's so much easier to get people running against each other who really are Republicans, and then you hopefully you get a good one out of that. That far too often the case that doesn't happen here.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the tell sign. If Drew McKissick really cared about open primaries, then maybe he would have been pushing a bill that stopped open primaries instead of pushing a bill that limited the representation of we the people. He's instead pushing a bill that says we want to limit the number of state delegates that can participate in our state GOP convention. And he's gone on to try to put in penalties for anyone who wants to appeal any sort of campaign or election shenanigans that may have taken place, whether it thought that they were, wrongfully, illegitimately defeated, or whether it be that they had individuals who said, look, I went to the ballot, my ballot was not properly counted, or I didn't get the right ballot. I was given a Democrat ballot. As we know, that happened here in Horry County. We had like 1,300 ballots that got sent out that were Democrat ballots for the runoff and should have been Republican. Shown that Drew McKissick was serious about helping the conservative movement and the Republican Party, as opposed to getting behind this other nonsense that actually prevents us from having a voice. So the proof's in the pudding, folks. You can see his actions speak much. And also really interesting that anytime someone comes to question him, if they have a camera, he refuses to answer. So what is it that you would say off camera that you won't say on camera, Drew? What are you afraid of?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I really like people who are up front. And look, there are people who go on camera all the time and talk out of one side of their mouth and do the other. But he just chooses to pretty much avoid all of it. And you
Yep.
really want somebody who's more vocal and really more committed to the platform of the GOP here in South Carolina.
Right. You know what? And if he wasn't such a squishy Republican, to use your term, then I don't think camera. But the fact that he knows there's going to be questions that are asked that he doesn't want to answer, and he doesn't want to be caught on camera with his pants down around his ankles. So that's just the fact of the matter is. So yeah, fire Drew. Hopefully we'll have Zoe Warren back on the Thursday before the state convention. So that will be the 18th at 7 p.m. and we'll give you more details as we get those. Well, folks, that's going to do it for episode 23 of the Pound Money Politics. We thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Shannon Grady.
John Cummings.
And as always, God bless, Godspeed, and we will see you next time.